My parents chose my sister over me and told me to apologize or leave, so I walked away quietly and watched their world collapse without me. My sister Megan, who had been sitting with her arms folded like a judge at a talent show, shifted in her seat, clearly not expecting that response. And my mom, well, she was already halfway into her sigh, the kind she saved for when I didn't play along. But this time, I wasn't playing. Let me back up a bit. I'm Evan, 32 years old, the older brother, the quiet one, the guy who fixes the broken sink at 2 a.m. and pretends he doesn't hear the family whisper about how he never quite lived up to his potential. For years, I kept my head down. I worked hard, paid my bills, and paid their bills too when they came up short, which they always did. I helped Megan with her rent, her groceries, her tuition, quietly. No credit needed, just one less burden for the golden child. But the problem with always stepping up is that people start treating it like your job. It started subtly years ago. A passing comment from my dad, "Megan's always been the ambitious one," or from my mom, "You're lucky you don't need much, Evan." And Megan, she just soaked in the praise like sunlight, tossing me the occasional thanks the way you might tip a waiter who refills your water without being asked. But it all boiled over one Sunday afternoon in March. Megan had just finished complaining, again, about how hard it was to be a full-time student. Never mind the fact she hadn't held a job in 3 years. Never mind the fact I'd quietly sent $1,200 to her bursar's office the week before. Dad turned to me then, out of nowhere, with this cold look in his eyes and said, "You should apologize. Your sister deserves respect, not you." Just like that, as if my years of sacrifice were nothing, as if respect was something only Megan was entitled to, and I just smiled. "All right," I said, pushing back from the table. "Then she can cover her own tuition." The silence that followed was glorious. What none of them knew was that moment, that single offhand comment, was the final nudge I needed. Not to explode, not to argue, but to walk away with quiet, calculated precision. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't slam a door. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood up, took my plate to the sink like any other Sunday, and walked out of my parents' house for what I knew might be the last time in a long while. The air outside felt different, lighter, like someone had finally let the pressure out of a balloon I'd been carrying in my chest for years. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop, the tuition account for Megan's university. I logged in, because of course the bills were under my name, and clicked the little box that said Cancel Automatic Payments. One click. That was it. Then I went to the utility accounts, the ones tied to my parents' address, the ones I'd been secretly covering for the last 3 winters, because the heating bill always got out of hand. I changed the billing address to theirs and removed my card info. I was surgical, methodical. By the time I closed the laptop, I had cut every financial tie I had to them. The next morning, I ignored the family group chat. Megan had sent some meme about Monday blues with a little coffee cup emoji. I guess the reality of what I'd said hadn't hit yet, but it didn't take long. 2 days later, I got a call from my dad, first one in months where he used his serious tone, the one that used to make me straighten up as a kid. "Evan, I just got a notice from the university. Megan's tuition hasn't been paid. What's going on?" I paused for a second, letting the silence hang. "I told you," I said, "she can cover it herself." "You're being petty," he snapped. "No," I replied. "I'm being fair." He hung up. Later that night, Megan called me. She didn't yell. She cried. Said she didn't understand why I was doing this to her, that school was stressful enough, that everything was just so expensive. I could have said 1,000 things. About the new iPhone she bought last month, about the nights out, about the DoorDash receipts I used to quietly pay off. Instead, I just said, "I know it's hard. You'll figure it out." And then I hung up too. Over the next few days, the house of cards I'd been holding up began to collapse. The gas was shut off at my parents' house for 2 days because the autopay didn't go through. Megan's classes were frozen due to a past due balance. My mother called to ask if I had accidentally turned off the payments. Accidentally. I didn't answer that one. I started working overtime, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. With no one bleeding my wallet dry, my savings started to grow for the first time in years. I finally booked a vacation for myself. Just a weekend, a cabin up north, no Wi-Fi, just trees and peace. It felt like breathing again. And while I was learning what freedom tasted like, my family was finally learning what my silence had been paying for. By the end of that first week, the silence from my family started to shift. It wasn't quiet anymore, it was charged, like the air right before a storm. I could feel them stewing, waiting, hatching some plan to guilt me back into place. Sure enough, Sunday came around again, and I got the text, "Dinner at 6. We need to talk." Dad, not a question, a command. The kind he'd used my whole life, the one I used to drop everything for. But this time I didn't reply. I went grocery shopping instead, bought myself some decent steaks, cooked them medium rare, and ate while watching a documentary about people who escape cults. The irony wasn't lost on me. Monday morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from my mom and one from Megan. The voicemail she left was quiet, almost rehearsed. "Hey, I know things have been tense. Dad he says things sometimes, but I really need your help, Evan. They froze my school account. I can't register for next semester. Can we talk?" She sounded different, not apologetic, just afraid. And I won't lie. There was a flicker of sympathy in me, but it passed quickly. I remembered her laughing at dinner a few months ago about how she couldn't live like a broke college student, how she joked that she had a sponsor, meaning me. I remembered the time she asked for textbook money, then posted a story from a spa weekend. I remembered the phrase, "She deserves respect, not you." So I texted back just one word, "No." That afternoon, I got a visit. I opened the door to find my dad standing there, arms crossed, looking more like a landlord than a father. He didn't wait for an invitation, just walked in. "You're going to throw away your whole family over some money?" he said. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I saw it, not authority, not strength, just fear, because he wasn't in control anymore. "It's not about the money," I said. "It's about the years I spent being invisible except when you needed something from me." He scoffed. "Oh, come on. We raised you, fed you." I laughed. "And I paid it all back 10 times over. But that was never enough, was it?" He didn't answer, so I asked him point blank, "Do you even know what I do for a living?" Silence. I nodded. That's what I thought. He left without another word. And when the door closed, I stood there for a long minute, breathing in the stillness. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. By Wednesday, it became clear they were unraveling without me. It started with a call from my aunt, Dad's sister. She hadn't reached out in years, not since that family reunion where Megan got a standing ovation for getting into college, and I got told to take the group photo. She was suddenly all warmth and concern. "Hey, sweetie, I heard there's been tension. Your dad's just stressed, with Bill's and Megan's school stuff. He says things he doesn't mean." I almost laughed. They had activated the extended family guilt squad. Classic. "Aunt Carol," I said, keeping my voice even, "did he tell you I was paying Megan's tuition?" She paused. "Well, he said you helped out a little, $10,000 a semester." Silence, and the utility bills, and their car insurance, and groceries, sometimes more. Silence. I could picture her doing the mental math. "Oh," she finally said. "Yeah," I replied. "Oh." She didn't push after that, just mumbled something about being there if I needed to talk and hung up. That's when I knew things had shifted for real this time. I'd been the scaffolding holding up their fantasy of confidence, the silent middle beam they never thanked but leaned on constantly. And now, the house was creaking. Megan posted something cryptic on Instagram that night, a black screen with the words, "Some people are only generous until you stop praising them." A few of her friends commented with "You okay?" and heart emojis. I didn't engage, didn't reply, just scrolled past it and turned off my phone. Because while they were busy flailing, I was busy thriving. That week, I finally got the certification I'd been working on for nearly a year. My boss called me into his office and offered me a raise, and not a small one either. He said, "I don't know what changed lately, but your focus has been razor sharp." I wanted to say I stopped bleeding for people who never noticed they were cutting me, but instead, I just smiled and said thank you. Then I walked back to my desk, sat down, and looked up apartments across town, nicer ones, cleaner, with light. It was the first time in years I was planning something just for me, and every single part of it felt earned. The next family dinner happened without me. That was a first. No text asking if I could bring dessert. No passive-aggressive reminders about how much Megan has on her plate and could I maybe cover the groceries this time. Just silence. But I heard about it anyway. My cousin Sarah texted me a picture from across the table. It was Megan, sitting stiffly next to my dad, both of them looking like someone had died. The caption read, "Tense vibes. Where were you? You're the only one who ever makes these things bearable." I didn't reply. The next day, Megan called me again. I didn't pick up, but she left a voicemail that I played twice, just to be sure I heard it right. "Hey, I know you're mad, but Dad's making me take out a loan for next semester, like a real loan with interest. He said if you won't help, it's not his problem anymore. I don't know what to do." There it was, the unraveling, not just of their finances, but of their alliances. She'd been Dad's favorite since day one. But favorites are only useful when they're convenient. The moment she became a burden, he turned cold. That's when I realized something important. I had never really been the black sheep. I was just a mule, the one they could load down with responsibility until I collapsed. And when I didn't collapse, they resented me for it. I went through old bank records that night. Every wire, every Venmo transfer, every grocery bill I'd covered. Over the last 3 years, I had spent just shy of $46,000 on them. $46,000 gone. All while they called me emotionally distant. All while Megan posted photos from cafes with captioned latte art, and my dad made comments about how some people just aren't leadership material. That night, I did something symbolic. I went into the hallway closet and grabbed the shoebox I used to keep just in case receipts. The ones I kept to remind myself I was useful, that I mattered, that I contributed. I dumped them all in the trash. Not bitterly, not even sadly, just done. Because the truth is, I had given enough. More than enough. And now, I was about to take everything I'd been giving to them and give it to myself. 2 weeks passed before I heard from my mother. Not a word, not a call, not even a forwarded meme like she used to send when she was trying to break the ice. I'd almost forgotten what silence from her felt like. Then, one Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. Not a call, a photo. It was a bill, an electricity notice, pink slip across the top, warning of shutoff in 3 days. The caption underneath said simply, "We didn't realize you stopped paying this too." No greeting, no apology, just that flat, accusatory tone, as if I had pulled the rug out from under them, instead of revealing they never had solid ground beneath their feet in the first place. I stared at the message for a long while. I didn't respond. Instead, I leaned back on my couch in my new apartment, which smelled like cedar and wasn't freezing because I paid for the heat. The thing about being the reliable one is people think you're a permanent fixture, like electricity, like water. They never thank you for being there until you're not. That weekend, my mom showed up at my door. She looked thinner, tired, holding a Tupperware container like it was a peace offering. "I thought you might want some of that stew you like," she said, eyes darting around the hallway like she was afraid someone would see her. I didn't take it. Instead, I stepped outside, closed the door behind me, and asked, "Why are you really here?" She blinked. "We're behind on a few things." "We?" I asked. "Or Megan?" She didn't answer right away. She's been crying a lot. She said she's not doing well in school. She says she feels abandoned. I felt something inside me flinch, but not in the way it used to. Not guilt, not sympathy, just recognition. "I know the feeling," I said. My mom's eyes narrowed. "You're punishing us." "No," I replied. "I'm just not saving you anymore." The look on her face said it all. For the first time in my life, she realized something she had never considered before. Not when I was 12, fixing the leaky sink, or 25, paying their rent, or 32, covering tuition. That without me, things fall apart. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the failure after all. By the time the final tuition deadline hit, Megan still hadn't paid. I knew because the university sent an email, not to her, but to me. Apparently, I was still listed as the financial guarantor. Funny how that works. You spend 3 years footing someone else's dreams, and the system just assumes you'll always be there. I didn't reply to the email. I forwarded it to Megan with 2 words, "Handle it." An hour later, she called. I let it ring. Then she texted, "I'm going to have to take a semester off. Are you happy now?" I stared at the message, not out of guilt but curiosity. She still thought this was about happiness, like I'd orchestrated this to hurt her, that it was about revenge. But it wasn't. It was about reality. Megan had spent her life walking on a tightrope, but only because she never knew I was the net. Now, without me beneath her, she was learning how thin that rope really was. That week, I got a card in the mail from my dad. A literal card, Hallmark, with a generic front that said, "Let's talk things out." Inside, he'd written, "You've made your point, but your sister's struggling. She's still family. We can move past this, but only if you come to the table." I chuckled. Come to the table, as if I hadn't spent my whole life at that table, silent, serving, unseen. As if they hadn't yanked the chair out from under me the moment I started asking for a little space to breathe. I didn't respond to the card. I tucked it in a drawer, not to revisit it, but to remind myself later that the apology never came. Not really. That same week, I got my first real taste of what life could be, without them pulling on every loose thread of my time and money. I bought myself a new suit, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to see myself in something sharp. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. He looked lighter, firmer, real. Then I booked a weekend trip. Nothing big, just a cabin by a lake, quiet, alone, my kind of luxury. And while they scrambled to figure out how to pay the bills, I sat by the fire that Saturday night with a whiskey in one hand and no phone in the other. No emergencies, no requests, no guilt, just peace. 2 months after I cut the cord, Megan dropped out. Not officially, at least not at first. But I heard about it from a friend who worked at the university. She stopped going to class, fell behind, missed deadlines, and eventually, they deactivated her student email. That was when she showed up at my apartment. I wasn't expecting her, and she didn't text first, just knocked softly like someone asking for a favor they knew they didn't deserve. I opened the door, and there she was, Megan, the girl who used to float through life like the world owed her something just for showing up. But now, she looked small, tired, diminished. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer. I stepped outside instead, closed the door behind me, and leaned against the railing. She hesitated, then followed, wrapping her arms around herself like the cold had just reached her. "I thought you hated me," she said. I looked out over the parking lot, not wanting to make it too easy. "I don't hate you. I just stopped sacrificing myself for you." She flinched, like I'd slapped her. "You could have told me you were done." "I did," I said. "You just didn't believe me." Silence. "I thought," she started, voice cracking, "I thought you'd always be there." There it was, the unspoken truth. They all thought I'd always be there. That no matter how invisible I was, how used up, how unappreciated, I'd never leave. Because that's what reliable people do, right? They endure. "I was never supposed to be your plan B, Megan," I said. "I was your brother, not your investor, not your ATM, not your insurance policy." She started crying then, quiet, ashamed. "I didn't know how much you were doing," she whispered. I thought Mom and Dad were helping too." I laughed, dry and short. "They haven't lifted a finger in years. You were their project, I was their foundation." She wiped her face with the sleeve of a sweatshirt I recognized. It used to be mine. She probably didn't even remember taking it. "I'm sorry," she said. It was the first time I'd heard those words from her, but I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. Not yet, and maybe never. Instead, I nodded once and said, "Good." Then I went back inside and left her standing on the porch. The next time I saw my father, he wasn't yelling. He wasn't posturing. He was standing in line at the bank. I hadn't expected to run into him. I was there closing out an old savings account, one I'd set up back when I thought I might help Megan with grad school one day. A funny thought now. He saw me before I saw him. Did that slow double-take people do when they don't know whether to wave or walk away? I didn't wave. He stepped out of line and walked over, like we were old friends, wearing that thin, diplomatic smile he used when trying to sell something. "Evan," he said, "we should talk." I looked at him, really looked. His shoes were scuffed. He had a folder under his arm, bulging with paperwork. Stress was hanging off him like a bad cologne. "I think we've done enough talking," I said. He sighed. "Look, I won't pretend we didn't mess things up, but your mother's been losing sleep. Megan's barely eating. We just want to put this behind us." "You mean now that the bills are stacking up and I'm not cleaning up the mess?" He opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the floor. "I didn't know it was this bad," he finally said. "No," I said. "You didn't want to know." That landed. I saw it in the way his shoulders sagged, the way he suddenly looked older than I remembered. "I was wrong," he said quietly. Not the full apology, not the ownership, but close. I could have said a lot in that moment. I could have offered a sliver of grace, opened a door, extended something to ease the weight. But then I remembered the years of being invisible, of being blamed, dismissed, used. So I said, "You're not the one who gets to say when this ends." He nodded slowly, didn't argue, and when he turned to walk back to the line, he looked like a man who finally realized the foundation he built his pride on was never his to claim. And me? I left the bank that day feeling something I hadn't felt in years, power. It's been 6 months now. Megan took a job at a bookstore. My parents downsized, sold the house they swore they'd retire in. The family group chat still exists, but it's quieter, hesitant. They don't ask me for money anymore. I never made a big announcement. I didn't post some speech about cutting off toxic people. I just walked away, not out of anger, but peace. These days, I feel like I'm finally seeing the world clearly. The strange thing about carrying weight for so long is you forget what it means to stand tall. I've been standing straighter lately, walking with purpose, looking people in the eye. Some nights, I still wake up in a cold sweat, thinking I've forgotten some bill, some responsibility. But then I remember, I'm only responsible for myself now. And that feels like freedom. Last week, I got a text from Megan. Just a photo of her first paycheck from the bookstore. No caption, no plea, just proof of something changing. I didn't respond right away. I sat with it, considered what it meant. In the end, I just texted back, "Proud of you." Because despite everything, I was. My therapist says healing isn't linear, that some days I'll feel strong, and others I'll miss the comfort of known pain. She's right. There are moments when I think about calling them, showing up at Sunday dinner, sliding back into that familiar role. But then I remember how it felt, the invisible chains, the silent expectations, the smothering weight of their needs. So instead, I'm learning to fill my life with things that feed me rather than drain me. I joined a hiking group, started taking cooking classes, put some money into a retirement account. Small things, normal things, The kind of things people do when they're building a life instead of financing someone else's. My mother still texts sometimes, not demands anymore, just weather updates, neighborhood news. I respond when I want to, which isn't often. My father hasn't reached out since the bank. I think he's still processing what it means to stand on his own feet at his age. Megan sends the occasional photo or meme, nothing direct, nothing vulnerable, just enough to keep the door from closing completely. And me? I'm learning what it means to put myself first without apology, to set boundaries without explanation, to exist without constantly justifying my place at the table. The night sky looks different these days, wider, more vivid, like I'm seeing stars that have been there all along, but I was too busy looking down to notice. My life is quieter, simpler, and mine. Sometimes I wonder if they ever think about me the way I thought about them, constantly, carefully. If they ever realize how much they took, how little they gave. But mostly, I don't think about them at all, and that, more than anything, feels like victory. Last year, I would have given anything for their approval. This year, I gave up everything and found my own. It turns out, family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who you choose to become when you finally put down everyone else's dreams and pick up your own. My life is smaller now, quieter, but it's all mine, and that makes it immeasurably larger than anything I had before. Looking back, I realized there were warning signs all along. The pattern started when I was just a teenager. I remember my 16th birthday, how I'd saved up for months working at the local hardware store to buy my first car. Nothing fancy, just a used Honda with faded paint and a temperamental transmission. Dad had promised to match whatever I saved, said it would teach me responsibility. The day I went to buy it, he suddenly remembered a gambling debt that needed immediate payment. My car fund became his bailout. Megan got her first car as a gift on her 16th birthday, 2 years later, brand new, with a red bow on the hood. Then there was college. I worked 2 jobs while taking classes, scraping together tuition semester by semester. Meanwhile, they co-signed Megan's student loans without hesitation, even covered her housing so she could focus on her studies. I lived at home, commuting 2 hours each way because it was cheaper. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd quietly make coffee, trying not to wake anyone as I slipped out the door. Sometimes, Mom would shuffle in half asleep and ask why I had to leave so early. Some of us have to work, I'd say, and she'd just nod vaguely before going back to bed. My graduation came and went without ceremony. They couldn't make it because Megan had a dance recital the same weekend. You understand, Dad said, not really asking. I sat alone at commencement, watching other families cheer and take photos. Afterward, I treated myself to dinner at a chain restaurant and drove home in silence. My diploma arrived in the mail 2 weeks later. Mom taped it to the refrigerator like a child's drawing, where it stayed for 3 days before being replaced by Megan's acceptance letter to her dream university. The first time I covered their mortgage was during my second year out of college. Dad called at midnight, voice tight with panic. We're 30 days behind. They're threatening foreclosure. I was just getting on my feet, had finally moved into my own apartment after saving for months. The payment wiped out my emergency fund, but Dad promised it was just this once, a temporary setback. 3 months later, the scene repeated, then again, and again. Meanwhile, Megan flunked out of her first university, then transferred to another, more expensive, better support systems, Mom explained. Each transfer came with new fees, new housing deposits, new textbooks. Each time, the family finances mysteriously couldn't stretch to cover it, but mine could. Somehow. I remember one Thanksgiving sitting at the table while everyone shared what they were grateful for. Mom was grateful for Dad's new promotion, which never seemed to alleviate their financial troubles. Dad was grateful for Megan's perseverance in school, despite being on her 3rd university in 4 years. Megan was grateful for her new study abroad opportunity that I had secretly funded after Dad called me in desperation. When my turn came, I said I was grateful for steady work. Dad raised his glass and said, "At least someone in this family knows how to keep a job." And they all laughed. I smiled too, fork pushing food around my plate, wondering if they realized the irony. Christmas gifts followed the same pattern. I'd receive practical items, socks, a gas station gift card, sometimes a sweater that was clearly on clearance. I always acted appreciative. Meanwhile, Megan unwrapped designer handbags, expensive electronics, concert tickets. She has more expensive taste, Mom would explain with a shrug when she thought I wasn't listening. When I turned 30, I bought myself a modest house, nothing extravagant, just a small 2-bedroom with a yard, where I thought I might eventually get a dog. I invited them to the housewarming. Dad walked through the rooms, pointing out all the things that needed fixing. Mom wondered aloud why I'd chosen such an out-of-the-way location. Megan asked if I was going to do something about the outdated kitchen. Not one congratulation, not one acknowledgement that I'd achieved this milestone entirely on my own while still helping them. That night, after they left, I sat on my new front steps and realized I felt more alone in their presence than in their absence. 2 months later, when their water heater burst, flooding their basement, I was the first person they called, not for emotional support, but for my credit card number. I gave it, like always, and spent my weekend hauling waterlogged furniture to the curb, while Megan posted poolside photos from a weekend trip with friends. Much needed me time, her caption read. I came home Sunday night with an aching back, mud-caked clothes, and the distinct feeling that something had to change, but still I stayed. Still I paid. Why? I've asked myself this question 1,000 times since walking away. Maybe it was hope. Hope that eventually they'd see me, really see me. Maybe it was guilt, the kind that good parents instill in you from childhood, the belief that family comes first, always. Or maybe it was just habit, the path of least resistance. It's easier to pay the bill than to face the argument, easier to shoulder the burden than to watch it all collapse. Part of me knew they were using me. In quiet moments, I'd admit it to myself, but there's a difference between knowing something and accepting it, between recognizing a truth and acting on it. I kept telling myself that next time would be different. Next time, they'd appreciate me. Next time, they'd reciprocate. Next time, they'd see my sacrifice for what it was, not obligation, but love. A warped, unhealthy kind of love, but love nonetheless. The catalyst wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming match, no theft too large to forgive, no betrayal too deep to overlook. Just that simple phrase, she deserves respect, not you. 6 words that crystallized a lifetime of inequity. 6 words that made me realize I'd been writing checks against my soul that my family had no intention of honoring. In the months since I walked away, I've thought a lot about forgiveness, about what it means to forgive someone who doesn't believe they've done anything wrong. My therapist says forgiveness isn't about the other person, it's about freeing yourself from the weight of resentment. But I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of enlightenment yet. Right now, I'm still learning what it feels like to breathe without permission, to exist without apology, to spend without guilt. Last month, I adopted a dog from the local shelter, a scruffy mutt with one ear that flops and one that stands straight up. The shelter said he'd been returned 3 times, too energetic, too needy, not what they expected. I named him Chance. Every morning we walk the trail behind my house as the sun comes up. He runs ahead, loops back to check on me, then races forward again, his joy uncontained. I'm learning from him, about trust, about resilience, about finding excitement in the day despite past disappointments. You're different now, my coworker said last week, lighter somehow. I didn't tell her why, just smiled and nodded, but she's right. I am different. The strangest part isn't how much has changed, but how easy the change was once I made the decision, like removing a stone from my shoe that I'd been limping on for years. The relief is almost dizzying. Yesterday, I ran into Megan at the grocery store. I hadn't seen her in weeks. She looked tired but more substantial somehow, like reality had finally put weight on her bones. We stood awkwardly by the produce, shopping baskets hanging from our arms like counterweights. You look good, she said, eyes taking in my new haircut, the vacation tan still lingering on my face. Thanks, I replied. You working out okay at the bookstore? She nodded. It's fine. Different than I expected, but fine. A pause. Dad had a health scare last week, just high blood pressure, but they put him on medication. I felt a twinge of something, not guilt exactly, but the muscle memory of responsibility. I'm sorry to hear that. He's fine, she said quickly. Then, we should get coffee sometime. I looked at her, trying to see behind the words. Was this an overture? A fishing expedition? A genuine attempt to rebuild? I couldn't tell. Maybe, I said, and I meant it. Maybe. Not yes, not no, just maybe. A word that left space for possibility without commitment. We finished our awkward conversation with promises to text that we both knew might not materialize. As I watched her walk away, I realized something important. I didn't feel the pull anymore, that gravitational force that had always yanked me back into orbit around their needs. I was my own center now. I made dinner that night in my quiet kitchen. Nothing fancy, just pasta with vegetables from the farmer's market and a glass of wine I didn't have to share. Chance lay at my feet, occasionally lifting his head when I dropped a piece of carrot. Through the window, I could see stars emerging in the evening sky, bright pinpricks against darkening blue. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring with someone else's emergency. Wasn't calculating how much money I could spare this month for someone else's crisis. Wasn't rehearsing explanations or apologies for putting myself first. This morning, I woke before my alarm, made coffee, let Chance into the backyard, stood on the porch watching mist rise off the grass. My phone showed a text from my mother, sent at 3 a.m. Thinking of you. Just that. No request, no guilt trip, no passive-aggressive reminder of my absence. Just 3 words that might be the beginning of something new, or might not. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat with the feeling, turning it over like a strange coin found on a sidewalk. When I did text back hours later, I kept it simple, hope you're well. Not a door flung wide open, but not locked shut either. Just slightly ajar, letting in a thin beam of light. The hardest lesson I've learned through all of this is that sometimes loving someone means walking away, not because you want to hurt them, but because staying hurts you, because the relationship as it exists is poisonous to your soul, because you can't be the person you're meant to be while being the person they demand you to be. I don't know what the future holds for me and my family. Maybe someday we'll find our way back to each other, on new terms, with clear boundaries and mutual respect. Maybe we won't. Maybe the distance will become permanent, the silence complete. Either way, I know this. I will never again diminish myself to elevate someone else. Never again trade my dignity for their approval. Never again believe that my worth is measured by how much I can give before I break. Today, I'm driving to the mountains for the weekend. Just me and Chance and the open road. I've rented a cabin by a lake, the same one I went to after first cutting ties, but this time, I'm staying longer. No rushing back to check mail or water plants or make sure the world hasn't collapsed in my absence. The world will spin just fine without my constant attention. I've packed light, some books I've been meaning to read, hiking boots, a journal. The journal is new. I bought it last week, a leather-bound thing with creamy blank pages. I'm not sure what I'll write in it. Maybe memories, maybe dreams, maybe nothing at all, but it's mine to fill however I choose. As I pack the car, I realize I'm humming. Not a particular song, just a tuneless melody that rises and falls with my movements. I can't remember the last time I caught myself doing that, making music for no reason other than the simple joy of being alive in my own skin. My phone buzzes, a text from Megan about that coffee. Are you free next Tuesday? I look at the message for a long moment, then I type back, can't do Tuesday. How about the following week? I'll be back from my trip by then. Her response comes quickly, where are you going? Once that question would have felt loaded, accusatory. Why are you going somewhere when we might need you here? But now, I just read it as curiosity. Or perhaps I'm giving her more credit than she deserves. Either way, my answer is simple. Mountains. Some time to think. 3 dots appear as she types. Disappear, appear again. Finally, that sounds nice. Be safe. 2 words I don't think she's ever said to me before. Be safe. Not bring me back something, or I need you to, or before you go, can you? Just be safe. Maybe she's changing too. Maybe this forced separation has been good for both of us. Or maybe I'm reading too much into a common pleasantry. Time will tell. I finish loading the car. Chance jumps into the passenger seat, nose already pressed to the window in anticipation of adventure. I take one last look at my house, the porch light I'll leave on, the mailbox full of unwanted flyers, the flowering bushes I planted last spring. It looks like a home, my home, not a way station, not a pit stop, not a place to collapse between crises, but a home. I slide into the driver's seat, adjust the mirror. The face that looks back at me is familiar yet different, calmer, more present. I start the engine, put the car in reverse, and begin the journey away from everything I've known. But this time, unlike all the times before, I'm not running from something. I'm driving toward myself. The road stretches ahead, winding through neighborhoods, then suburbs, then open country. Chance pants happily beside me, occasionally nudging my arm with his wet nose. I roll down the windows once we hit the highway, let the wind whip through the car. It feels like flying, like freedom. My phone buzzes again on the seat beside me. I don't check it. Whatever it is, crisis or pleasantry, demand or genuine connection, it can wait. Right now, this moment belongs to me alone, the sky, the road, the future stretching endless before me. All mine to navigate as I choose. And for the first time in my life, that feels exactly right.